I'm appalled that anyone would think that John or I would be involved in such a hideous, heinous crime. But let me assure you that I did not kill JonBenet.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. My guess is the child had her head whacked against something and then was still alive and strangled. Those are the words of Dr. Robert Kirshner, a retired Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for Cook County, Illinois. Now, if you understand the autopsy, then you're going to connect JonBenet to her killer. If you misunderstand it, you may connect her to the wrong person. And that's quite an important step or misstep to take if you're going to connect Patsy to her daughter's death. And also, if you think about Dr. Kirshner, he's a retired Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, just the way that he expresses this. My guess is the child had her head whacked against something. That's really quite casual, and if you ask me, a simplistic assessment from him. Quite a few doctors have actually studied the evidence and they can't seem to agree on what they are seeing. They can't agree on what came first. They can't agree on the time lapse between various injuries. And most of all, they can't seem to agree on the severity of the sexual injury. So if a faculty of doctors can't make sense of the injuries, how did investigators really have a hope of achieving any kind of consensus amongst a jury in a court of law? Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, I see in the comments there are quite a few complaints about pronunciation, complaints that you're doing too many videos on this, too few on that, and this is my response to those complaints.
We know that we annoy a lot of people out there, but we tell people if they don't like listening to us, just switch off the TV.
This is incredible.
Bear in mind, I'll be in Praia de Luz tomorrow. That's the 3rd of May. I'll be on the ground reporting from Praia de Luz, so look out for content on the Madeleine McCann case on the anniversary, 3rd May. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button. Also go to Team Peachtree for some interesting content on France, the trip from Van Gogh country, that is Auvers-sur-Oise, to Givony, where Claude Monet painted. I'll put a link to that in the description. And let's get started.
I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul. We feel like there are at least 2 people on the face of this earth that know who did this.
So if we play that back, you'll notice when Patsy says, I did not kill JonBenet, she actually pulls that off quite well. It's the part after that where she says, I didn't have anything to do with it. At the end of that, there's a long, slow blink, and that's something we see quite often in true crime, that shutting off, right? That long, slow blink. There's also kind of a funny moment in a way where she's sort of shaking her hand, pointing with 2 fingers, saying there are at least 2 people. John's sitting next to her, and she's sort of shaking her fingers in his direction. John doesn't look too pleased about it, does he? Now, I know on this channel there are quite a few people who believe Patsy was involved, and there's some substance to that, certainly in terms of the Ramsey ransom note. But, I haven't covered the second opinions of pathologists yet, and I do think that is a crucial area which is either, depending on how you interpret it, inculpatory or exculpatory in terms of Patsy Ramsey. And so, actually, we haven't just covered second opinions of these pathologists, but second opinions of second opinions, third opinions, fourth opinions, and so on. And when we talk about it in that way, it might sound silly, but it starts giving you an indication that we are dealing with something that is quite subtle, quite complicated, and something that even the experts, even medical doctors, can't fathom. Now, although there are elements of the Ramsey case that are straightforward or should be straightforward, such as the legitimacy of the ransom note. In other words, is the ransom note, is it what it pretends to be? Is the ransom note legitimate? Right? Quite a simple question. Is it what it is, or isn't it what it is? And then also a fairly simple question as well is, who authored it? And I think those go hand in hand. If it's not what it pretends to be, then the author is not who he or she pretends to be either. And so there's no doubt there are other areas that are fiendishly complicated and difficult to disentangle. It's not that everything is complicated, and it's also not that everything is simple. Some things are simpler than others. Some things are more complicated than others. Probably the most complex and troublesome area of this case is the autopsy evidence. Of course, we can see the wounds, but we don't know for sure what came first. There are even some wounds that we're not 100% sure what caused them, and we're dealing with at least two ostensibly criminal acts here, one sexual and another apparently a crime of violence. I've always felt what both of these acts have in common are their clumsiness. The sexual injury seems to involve a paintbrush, and the violence is hugely out of proportion. Both of them. It's overkill. So is the ransom note, by the way. Overkill. The duct tape, unnecessary. Overkill. Do you see that? The violence involves a clumsily constructed device when one wasn't even needed. Think about it. If the killer struck JonBenet and she's unconscious, why does he even need a garrote? He could use his hands. If he wants to use a ligature, why tie a stick to it? If he ties a stick, why break both ends of it? And then there's the contradictory nature of it. Do you see it? It's the contradiction in terms of the head blow, which is massive, and the strangulation, which is severe. Meanwhile, the sexual element is mild by comparison. There's also this. The sexual element, if one includes the birefringent material and the fact that the injury is so mild, some dismissed it as vaginitis, but it's also clumsy and unconventional. And did you know, according to Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, quote, the FBI had no record of a young child being strangled with a garrote, let alone by a parent using a garrote. After JonBenet's skull was fractured, she would have slipped into unconsciousness quickly. It would have been just as easy to end her life by smothering or strangling her by hand. There was no explanation why anyone would even think of making a noose, which takes time, slip it around her neck and use it to kill her, just so. On September 25th, Geraldo Rivera, who had been pursuing the thesis that JonBenet's killer must be a member of the Ramsey family, he hosted The Ramseys Fight Back on his daytime TV show. Jennifer Kay, a producer for Rivera's show, had persuaded Nedra Paugh, Patsy's mother, to give an impromptu interview from her home in Roswell, Georgia. Well, every day was Christmas to JonBenet, Nedra said. Nedra sat slumped in a chair, a defeated woman, her heartbreak palpable. JonBenet had a wonderful life, and that was taken away by a thief in the night as she slept. It's an interesting term Nedra uses, practically a euphemism, because if an intruder from a foreign faction did this, and it involved a ransom, a sexual attack and murder, well, that's more than mere theft. In fact, the one thing this crime wasn't was theft. Did you ever think if the intruder's motive was money, and if the intruder was running around an empty house for hours, unfettered, uninterrupted, why not steal valuable items? Why not gather them together? You know, he was inside a millionaire's mansion at Christmas. There had to have been loot everywhere. Patsy's jewelry, John's credit cards. Why use up that time with pointless activities like writing a 3-page note and constructing a garrote, when he could be reverse Santa Clausing, put Ramsey loot in a sack, cameras, computers, cash possibly, and making off with a clean pair of heels? Now let's go back to Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, referring to this moment where JonBenet's grandmother, Nedra, Patsy's mother, appears on the Geraldo Rivera show. When Nedra mentioned the crime, it was in a string of half-completed thoughts and seeming non sequiturs. I didn't know that she had been and then she says that word, to some extent, and hit on the head. I didn't know that. And somehow I hoped that she had died very quickly. And I think that she did. I really do believe that whoever has done this strangled her, because I'm sure that she put up a tremendous fight. Although she had tape in her mouth, she couldn't scream, but I know she had fought. That's the thing. There does seem to be a small degree of JonBenet struggling, but not none. And although there's some, there's not a lot. There are virtually no cuts or serious bruises anywhere. Another tricky area is staging. If the ransom note was staged, what else was? Was the duct tape staged? How about the ligatures around her wrists? How about the ligature around her throat? How about the garrote? Was that constructed to stage the crime? There are almost as many differing opinions in this area as there are pathologists with differing assessments on what actually happened to JonBenet physically. Now you can appreciate how these clouds of uncertainty, when converged, really create chaos in trying to decipher not just who did what, but what actually happened, when, and how. Does that make sense? I'm not going to take it further than that. This is just to let you know I'm right now actually reading the book written by Dr. Cyril Wecht. Some of it is very astute, but it seems even he seems to have gone off track here and there. Does that make sense? In the next episode, we're going to deal with one possibility that intertextually may prove whether Patsy may have done it. So look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.